Afternoon. Welcome to our session today. I have great pleasure in welcoming Kruti today. Kruti is
Hi.
the founder of Strategy, a brand strategy, communication strategy, and design firm. It's a 10-year-old firm, one of the oldest, if I may say, in terms of experience on the platform. Kruti, I think, started it when she was in class 10 or maybe 11. But they've got loads of experience across a wide range of FMCG products, and I'm very happy to have her speaking about how branding can be differentiated through packaging design. Without taking more time, Kruti, over to you. Welcome and have a great time.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kruti from Strategy. For a decade now, I've been building and refreshing and restarting brands. We've worked across domains, but over the last, sorry, one second, I think I'm on mute.
No, you're audible, perfectly audible. Go ahead.
Right. I'll just share my screen one second.
Are you seeing? I'm seeing presentation and all.
Folks, just hang around. We seem to have a slight technical difficulty here. She's on mute, yes, we are aware. Just a few seconds for her slideshow to pop up. Kruti, you could unmute. We can see your screen now. Perfect. Welcome back.
Hi. Sorry.
It happens a lot. Don't worry. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'll start from where I was earlier. So, like I said, we've been restarting brands since a while now, building them, pivoting them if needed. And over the last 6 years, we've actually shifted our focus to retail, to FMCG, and to the whole mass consumer space. We've worked across domains, but like I said, I personally find the FMCG space very exciting. So I'm going to take you through a little about how you can further drive brand positioning through your packaging design. And to understand this a little bit better, let's begin with a little game. So in the comments, if you guys, this is a game that, another agency has created, and we found it really, really lovely. So we've put this together. In the comments, you guys could just quickly type your answers as we go. Yeah. Which shampoo out of these do you think is more expensive in your understanding from what you look at on your screen?
Kruti, you need to move the slide down. We are still seeing the strategy effective brand building first screen.
Oh, I've moved it down.
It's not reflecting yet on your screen.
1 second.
Yeah, now it's moving.
Is it now?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm such a mess. Okay, so which of these shampoos do you think is more expensive? If you guys could please share your comments on the chat. Then we have, which of these coffees is the strongest according to you? And which of these cookies do you think is the healthier one? So if you see, I'm looking at your comments. One second. So it is, all about the power of the visual impression. If you actually, if I may take you back, both of these have the same logo, they are the same brand, and they essentially have the same value proposition. It's the same product, just packaged very, very differently. And, using different structures, different forms. And you see how it sort of quickly changes your perception of what you're looking at, because typically a consumer will get about 3 seconds to sort of decide if they're interested in what they're seeing, or if they want to sort of delve further into this product. So now, having seen this, you realize that your logo alone is not your brand. There's a lot more to your brand than just your identity. And a lot of times we hear this a lot, that your brand is more than your logo and all of that. But a lot of people sort of hear this a lot, but do not understand the magnanimity of why it is what it is, and why brand building is the exercise that it is. So let me take you through a little about the importance of brand strategy, because that is what sort of ties in your positioning and all the other activities that you're going to do. It is paramount to have your brand strategy in place. It's, in a sense, your ethos, values, your positioning, your tone of voice, a clear definition of your target market. All of that together forms your brand strategy. It's something that will breathe life into your logo. Like a brand strategy sets the tone for all the communication your brand will have thereon. It'll help you create an experience for your brand. It'll help you build your communication, marketing strategies, all of that. We've seen so many brands do this across verticals and all of that. And I'll take you through a couple of examples. Now let's look at the soap category. This is something we use every day. And if you look at Dove actually positions itself as a beauty bar. They don't really even call themselves a soap. Of course, right now they've started saying, oh, it's safe for hand washing and all of that, because they want to ride on the whole immunity and the usage of soap and hand wash that we're all doing now. But in a sense, the brand has positioned itself as a beauty bar. Pears wants you to believe they're really transparent, they are sort of pure, gentle, all of that. So if you see the product design as well as the packaging design, these two are sort of these two come together to form the brand positioning. Like Lux wants you to believe that there are petals in it, and they have it on the soap bar design as well. Of course, those are not actual petals, but they'd like you to believe that. They'd like Melimix would like the consumer to think that it is very, very, sort of good for you. It's made up of all herbs, and you see that translate across the box as well as the bar, and so on. So each of these brands clearly talks to a different consumer, which brings me to how unique our Indian consumer is. Now, we especially are a blend of practical decision makers and emotional decision makers. A brand has to do so much to connect with the Indian consumer. You have to obviously provide value, like kitna deti hai mileage wise, and all of that has been such an Indian thing. And it's the essence of what we guys, how we make decisions. It has to be an emotional connect. It has to make sense. It has to be, great on the pocket. It has to have great value. It needs to look good. It needs to look aspirational. So typically, brand has to check a lot of boxes for it to become a regular in the Indian consumer's mind and house. I'm going to, and now I'm going to talk about how our Indian retail space is online. I'm going to read these numbers out because I can't remember numbers. We are 350 million shoppers. We are 100 billion expected GMP by 2025. We're the 4th largest retail market in the world. We're great offline too. There are a lot of numbers, and there is a lot, of value that's generated offline. Right now, though, the pandemic has sort of put everything in a nosedive. So we'll see how the offline space emerges from it. But given the way Jio is going to tie in the Kirana store with whatever's happening online and stuff, this space is honestly only going to get more interesting. There's the much awaited news on the vaccine will sort of determine where the offline space goes. But in this pandemic, also the Kirana store has sort of been quite crucial. And, a lot of us have been introduced to brands that we probably wouldn't earlier try or wouldn't earlier use. And all that has happened through the Kirana stores. In a sense, our consumer is spoiled for choice. Now, whatever be the outcome of all of these geo deals and what happens offline and things like that, one thing is that the consumer is going to be even more spoiled for choice, right? It's going to be easier payment methods, more convenient delivery, a lot more brands to choose from. Everybody is going to be heavy on the healthy wave. So that's a whole plethora of new decisions to make. So this space is sort of going to get even more exciting, but at the heart of everything are emotions and convenience. And I guess a brand that sort of positions itself in that sweet spot is going to probably emerge as a winner. Now, this market is sort of on the cusp of transformation. It's led by the emergence of e-retail, and it's going, this whole growing influencers on shoppers with, like I said, with what Jio is doing and all of that. Shelf space, be it like, in your crowded Kirana store, or, in the aisles of food hall, or, the grid that we see on Amazon, that's what's, sort of going to compete for your consumers' attention like never before. Typically, your brand has about 3 seconds to catch your consumer's attention. Now, within those 3 seconds, you need to convey key details of your product offering. You need to create some sort of equity for your brand. You need to sort of showcase a value proposition. So I know this is a lot, which is why, your packaging needs to be really, really sort of well thought through. I'm going to share how we at Strategy approach this. We call it the 3C model, wherein, we sort of have, it builds from the context, goes to the consumer, and then leads to the final piece of the puzzle, which is the content. Now, first and foremost, understanding the context within which your brand resides is key. Right? What's your marketplace like? Can it be online or offline? What is the category like? What is the competition doing? Who is your competitor? What is it? What are some of the things that they've done and undone or done differently? All of this sort of forms the context in which you need to sort of evaluate yourself and where you stand. The second is the consumer. Now, this is, I just like to touch upon this term that everyone keeps talking about, which is human-centered design. Honestly, any design has to be human-centered design. Otherwise, it's not design. It's just decoration. So, like there's a lot of jargon floating around that, agencies and brands and marketing managers and everybody saying, oh, it's human-centered design and all that. I mean, all design is human-centered design. It does not make sense to, term that your design in that way. So the consumer is at the focus of this particular aspect of the model. And what are the factors that are most important to the consumer while making a purchase? Who is your consumer? What is the life cycle like? What would it take for them to buy into your product again? Why should they do it? In fact, interestingly, one of the projects that we are working on currently, we did some research and we found that the no preservatives claim is actually somewhat of a go-to, that people really feel like, oh, if it's no preservatives, let me sort of pick it up and let me try and, invest in this brand and things like that. It's a huge deal now for people. So that's something that we sort of realized that, okay, if this is important, how about we place it in a more prominent way and, we sort of give it more weightage on the packaging. And when we did a second test run, we actually found that that's something that people are, sort of picking up on and are appreciating. So research, consumer-centered research, if we will call it, that is something that we believe will add a lot of value to what you do. Now, this leads us to the final piece of the puzzle, which is the content. Now, creating an efficient hierarchy, a functional information architecture is very effective to packaging design. Understand the order in which you want your consumer to view the information, what you want to tell them upfront, what is something that they can discover after they've read a little about you, say on the front of pack, what makes the packaging more organized is that, you know, you need to understand your consumer so you can understand what's more important to them. Also, sometimes, you know, on a shelf or on a grid on Amazon or whatever, they are looking at, you know, it's somewhat like a sea of sameness, you know, like you have so many products saying the same things in the same way. And it doesn't make sense a lot of times because it's typically an effort where, you know, one brand did something and 5 other brands are doing it the same way. But maybe you could do a little bit of, you know, like digging a little deeper and trying to see if you can try and stand out on the shelf on your Amazon grid or wherever. Now, so with this model in place, I'm going to take you through the muesli category because it's something like, you know, Indians are now looking at muesli as an upgrade from cornflakes, wherein, you know, we've had that for breakfast all these years, and now everyone wants to get healthier. Everyone wants to, you know, sort of try and eat better. Also, it's considered the new cool healthy fad. It's perceived as a healthy breakfast option and so on. So I'll take you through 4 brands that are in the muesli category. The first one obviously is Kellogg's. It's the market leader. And then we have 3 younger brands as compared to Kellogg's, because Kellogg's has been around for centuries. Now, the positioning that Kellogg's is trying to do is better breakfasts that lead to better days. And they've sort of tried to bring this to life with this optimistic, happy, bright packaging. They have ingredient focused because obviously they want to talk about how this is 21% of fruit and nut, and they've also written it visually and verbally. You see them making this positioning. The next is soulful. Want to position themselves as honest, natural, genuine. It's quite, you know, like a straightforward, no frills attached packaging where, you know, they've written how much percentage of oats they have. Obviously, they want to sort of drive home that while Kellogg's is 21%, these people are 30% oats. And then, you know, they want to write about how this is a natural source of protein, the benefits of ragi, and so on. Yoga Bar wants to talk about how it's building a brand that consumers need to trust for nutrition, taste, and quality. It's a fairly new entrant in the market. And if you see, they've tried to use a larger than life product shot. I mean, the fruit isn't this big, even if, you know, and the cereal, the bowl, the size of everything is also quite big. It's a more product focused packaging. And what they've done nicely is because they're a new entrant, they've sort of tried to, you know, employ a really bright color scheme and bold color scheme. So that's something that sort of helps them stand out on the shelf. Nourish, again, is a brand they've clearly positioned themselves as healthy eating for urban living. They're way more expensive than the others on the shelf. And they've completely done away with what you see typically, which is a very product-focused approach. What they are now doing is they've made it quite minimal, illustrative. It's really premium, health-focused packaging. I'll also take you through nutraceuticals. Now, I've spoken about the way positioning is done across these. And I'll now take you through information architecture hierarchy. So, because we're doing a lot of nutraceuticals right now, like that's obviously everyone wants to, you know, sort of sell immunity tablets and immunity powders and immunity drinks and all of that. So we've sort of delved deep into this category. So I'm just going to share some of the visual hierarchy research that we have in place. Let me just see if I can zoom this in. Can you guys see this?
Yes, Ruti.
Okay. So, you know, we talk about the secondary information, that is your benefits, they've also sort of said that, you know, it's a fat burner, carb blocker, appetite suppressant. So it's a weight loss tablet, but, you know, they've sort of done a bunch of adjectives for it. They've also given you the tertiary information, which is, you know, your product detail and stuff like that. This is again what Himalaya is doing in the derma care space. And this is wow. This is another upcoming brand trying to, they do personal care otherwise, but now they're trying to also, do a lot of nutraceutical work. So with the advent of online retail, there are times when the first interaction your consumer is going to have is with your packaging, be it, visually or be it in the supermarket. They'll probably see the product in detail on your packaging, and converting that interaction into a brand experience is going to go a long way in trying to build your recall. So what your product needs to do, what your packaging needs to do is protection, and then maybe beyond it, right? Like, one is the core function of packaging is to encase your product. But then what else can it do? Can it also be brand building? Can it also do a lot of other interesting things that can sort of tie in the entire brand experience? So the first thing that we can try and do with our packaging is storytelling and engagement. It's key to building the brand experience. It helps to connect with consumers on a more personal and an emotional level. See, the functional use is obviously to protect the product, but with the amount of brands that are there in every category, a brand that is perceived as thoughtful, is something that you sort of want the consumer to take home. It's something that will make your consumer smile. It will sort of garner more loyalty. So obviously we're working with the assumption that the quality of the product here is a given, but storytelling is what sort of helps take this effort forward. If you think about storytelling, one thing that comes to mind is Maggi. And the way Maggi works is, this is a legacy brand, right? They probably, are top of mind in their category, and they are market leaders for years now. But what they've actually done with packaging is they've continuously tried to engage their audience. They always reinforce how authentic they are. I mean, they actually write authentic Indian noodles. Noodles are not Indian, but they've sort of, that's how much India loves Maggi and Maggi loves India. So, they talk about goodness, they talk about social activities. So you see over here, they work with Nanhi Kali, and they sort of put it right on top that, how they sort of support the Nanhi Kali initiative. They also do a lot of engaging work on the back of pack. So they'll give you a recipe, they'll share consumer stories, they'll tell you how to jazz up your Maggi, and, they'll also obviously give you all the mandatory information that they do. But the back of pack is sort of, where you have to sort of use, you'd rather use all surfaces efficiently, right? The side of pack, the back of pack, and all of that. You can use the back of pack to sort of drive home your brand story. You can showcase additional ranges. You can sort of show usages, certifications, safety, instructions, after sales. All of that is something that you do. But you could try and see how you can engage on your back of pack. So what we have here is what we did for Cookie Crisp for General Mills Northern America. We did this, I think, about last year. And what we've actually tried to do is we developed this puzzle game that we for the kids to sort of interact with the packaging, because there was a lot of conversation also about how kids are only playing games on their phones, and kids are using tablets and not really playing the kind of games that we all grew up playing. So we sort of devised this find your way, this both the packs that we did for Cocoa Puffs and for Cookie Crisp. And this was actually quite well received. I'm forgetting the number, but there was some decent increase in the sales and stuff. So this was good. Because we saw, this was the pilot project that we did this with, and because it did really well, we sort of tried to emulate the experience across brands for this particular client. So we work with General Mills. So we did this for Trix, we did this for Kix. When Country Cornflakes in the UAE was completing their 50 years, we sort of made the packaging for them. And then on the back of pack, we sort of again try to read family message that, this is for the entire family. And then there's a whole, note about how Country Cornflakes has been in the region for 50 years and so on. Now, could we then see how we can do interactive packaging? So, augmented reality, QR codes. This is something that we could see if we could try and drive home to sort of further build your brand positioning. Like if you have an elaborate brand story to tell through a video, or if you want to explain your laborious manufacturing process, all these things go a long way sort of justifying the price as well. Maybe place a simple QR code on the front of pack, and then you could sort of extend the experience further. Of course, we're seeing what augmented reality is doing, and that's only going to explode. So that's another thing you could do. And I want to I know the some of the examples that I have shared have been of established brands, or brands that have been around for a while. And we've had like a lot of clients who want us to, who want to first test the waters before they make an investment in figuring out packaging and, figuring out a brand strategy or a brand proposition, a story, and so on. And, a lot of times we're said that, we'll test the waters before we make a large investment. But it's not a fair test, is it? Because if you have, like I said in the beginning, you have about 3 or 4 seconds to sort of drive home the brand message, to sort of entice the user to make a purchase. If you're going to start with a sticker on a bag, the chances of the number of people picking you up is going to be far lesser. And of course, you can come back with saying that, oh yeah, but we got some positive comments and people tried it and all of that. That is not a viable option. If you're here to make a small thing from a small batch, yeah, sure, don't bother. But if you're here to build a brand that's going to last, then I guess it makes sense to sort of give your product a fair test, create store around it, create interest around it, and then go to market is what we think. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Kriti, thanks very much. Very quick overview of packaging for FMCG. I'm going to start with the questions that had come to us before the session started, and then we will just read out as and when more questions come up on the screen. Let's start with, does online versus offline change anything in terms of your branding approach, your packaging approach? A lot of brands are now going online first and online only. Are there any rules that you would take care of on online that you wouldn't really worry about offline? Is there something about a screen? Is there something about the backgrounds that in online makes you think differently about packaging than offline, knowing that your brand will possibly never sit on a retail shelf, but will, from an online marketplace, get shipped right to the consumer?
Right. You know what? Actually, that's a really interesting question. Thank you. But no, it actually gets tougher online. So, for instance, you have one grid, right? Say if you go to Amazon and if you type soap, you're going to see so many different things. You're going to see those little snapshots, right? Now, the you design this is going, like in a shelf, you actually see the product in life size. But on a grid, you're seeing a really small design, and consumers cannot physically interact with the product. So showcasing correct information quickly in a nice way becomes even more important because of the advent of online retail. Because it's like it's a grid of 3 typically, where you have this much space for your consumer to sort of say, oh, I want to click on this. It's even more competitive and even tougher. And like I said, that in an environment where you're offline, you kind of sort of have the, you're looking at it more detailed and stuff like that. You're not doing that online. The layering of information, yes, is a little different for the online space as compared to offline. But you can never actually design just assuming that this will be on me. You have to sort of arrive at that balance where something works for both.
There is a question around the hierarchy of information. If we could go back to some of those slides where you talk about how information is placed on a label.
Sure.
There again, any fixed rules there? Can the hierarchy change?
Actually, no. A lot of times what we're seeing is the category sort of determines, how the information. So for example, muesli is something that, you need to sort of call out because it's also new. It's also something that, you read it to understand, oh, this is muesli versus, this is some other grain mix and stuff like that. Now, by now, cornflakes, for example, has become something that, you see a visual and you don't need to read what it is. So that's one. Secondly, the hierarchy of information always depends on what is it that sort of is your USP, right? So now if you're selling something that everyone else is, but say if you're putting a certain grade of curcumin or turmeric or whatever in your product, if it's organic, and that's something that is maybe a plus one over another a brand, you sort of sure you've highlighted that. So that sort of, it really depends on a variety of factors, but essentially what it is that is your selling point, what it is that your consumer is looking for. If you have organic turmeric, but it's not something that's such a big, if it's not such a big USP for your consumer, then it sort of doesn't make sense. And the thing is, everything cannot scream out loud, right? Like consumers have to be given what's most important to them. So A, consumer insights will decide what comes where. B, your category will decide, the evolution of your category will decide how much information is it that you display on the front of pack, on the back of pack, and so on. And it's essential to give importance to only a few things, because when you're saying too many things at the same time, you're not really saying anything important, anything that will resonate. Sorry. So yeah.
So, do I hear you say that researching with your consumer is a very, very important element of your packaging journey, and that even if it's not 100 consumers, a sample 20, 25, what's a good number for you? Because let's assume some of us are small brands that don't have too much budgets to do very big things. What's really a good minimal number of people that you think we should talk to before we start this journey?
So we used to think N is equal to 30. But I will admit that over the last 2 years, we have ourselves, even when we're working for startup clients, or if we're working with, mid-sized such clients, we prefer to work with at least 120 people. It's something that I would rather invest time in speaking to that many people, because 30 is too small. And I also make sure that I'm speaking to a decent variety in my 120. Unless my TG is very, very clearly defined for me, I would rather speak to a decent variety and then sort of take the step 2. And we also do this periodically. So we don't only do research in the beginning. We'll do this through the project as and when we feel the need to. Like we recently worked on this project for Kada. We worked with Grandma's Kada for Wellbeing Nutrition. And we did research for that project about 4 times through the life cycle, because the project demanded it. It was a new product. It was Kada in an effervescent form. People had not seen this before, and so on. So, yeah.
Okay, so that I think leads to the next question is, what's the one thing the consumer needs to remember, right? That's what you're talking about, saying what's the key message your packaging wants to throw at him. In the case of Kellogg's, part of the breakfast piece. In the case of some other brand, highlighting the ingredients. But when a brand is new, then anything else that takes space on the packaging removes from the space the brand has to call out its own name.
Sorry?
How important is that for a new brand?
Sorry?
Should it be allowed to, can be compromised there? Because nobody knows my brand, nobody knows my ingredient, nobody knows my USP. So if those are the 3 things that are now unknown because I'm just launching, what should I still call out? Should I still call out my brand name so people register that, or should I be calling out the USP so people register the USP and then go back to saying, "Acha, ye kaun sa brand tha?" Where do you think the hierarchy works better for new brands?
Okay. So when it comes to something that's a new category, one thing is highlighting the logo for sure, because that is sort of the first thing that you then do when in the case that you mentioned. But when it comes to packaging, you need to convey what you're selling as well. So maybe you work with the brand name in a way that some equity is built with trying to say what you're selling. So for example, with this particular project that I was mentioning, it's called Grandma's Kada, and it's Kada that you drink, the hot liquid in an effervescent tablet. So we were actually going to name it something else, but this is exactly what we did. We sort of realized that, oh, we should call it Kada so that, there is no confusion. And, we didn't want to call it like, all immuno and things like that, because then, what is it? What are you selling? Is it another powder? What is it? So we did, and then you have to enhance the finer messaging in a slightly more emotional, easy storytelling way, so you can educate your consumer. Because if it's a new category and if it's a new product, then one of the key functions that you do, whether it's your packaging, whether it's anything else, is that you sort of tell them your story as to why do you exist. So during this project, we realized that ingredients were something that was key to why they would decide or not decide on trusting this particular Kada. So then we put it on the front of pack. We put each of the 13 ingredients in detail, because that was something that research showed was driving the trust and the credibility factor.
Got it. Abhishek, Jenna has a question on, should a startup brand, say for chocolates, spend huge on branding? I think the question here is coming from in a very cluttered category. What exactly should we be spending on?
I've always felt this one thing, that when people say branding, there are a few aspects to branding also, right? One is your core branding strategy and positioning and your packaging and all of that. And the second is what you do after, which is your digital spend and things like that. What I find in terms of just cost to these brands and businesses, and obviously these are all potentially my clients or the people I work with, that your cost increases month on month when you're doing your social media activity and you're doing Insta spends and all of that. But what people don't realize is you will scroll past an Insta post, you will walk past a hoarding, you will probably retain some of it and you will forget some of it. What actually stays for a very long time and what you don't generally change very often is your brand building, is your packaging, and is your overall ethos of who you are. So if I were to make this decision, I would probably, yes, invest on branding. I don't know what he means by huge, but no, I would definitely work with a slightly more thoughtful approach to this. And I don't know if spending huge or not huge, I mean, that's subjective. But yes, investing time in doing this correctly is what is important. Like, I would not trust someone who's going to turn up with 5 different brand strategies in 2 days. That's silly. In my opinion and experience, that's silly. That's not something that is value driven. So I would not do that. I would invest time is something that I would invest in heavily in getting my brand exercise right. And at the onset, this is the foundation. So if you're not going to invest in the foundation of your brand, then all your communication is going to be built, in a way that typically what happens is these brands then have to rebrand. They have to sort of come back. And like I said in towards the end, that testing the waters on what basis, right? I mean, you give your brand a fair chance to fight, especially in a cluttered market. Because I don't know if this is relevant to Abhishek's question, but there was this brand called Schmitten, and it was decently packaged and all of that. But there were a lot of other brand building, it was a cluttered brand, and it didn't do well. You don't see it anywhere now. So yeah, in a cluttered category, especially, you have to invest more, I think.
And I think what you're saying is measure not always investment in money, but also in terms of time and the thought that has gone behind it, and the process of arriving at your final decision.
Yeah, like if you speak to consumers, for example, if you're doing research and if you're speaking to consumers even on 2 stages, and if you're speaking to say 150 people, you'll do that survey, you will probably do some personal interviews. I mean, sometimes we just pick up the phone and talk to people who we think are our, consumers. I mean, there's no need to always have like a long drawn process about it. Like, just talking to your consumer helps. Like, our team is always going to food hall, we're always going to the kirana store, we'll pick up things, we'll buy stuff, we'll talk to people who are over there. I mean, research is important. So this is how you determine whether you're investing in the right brand building partner or not. You need to see, right, how much investment are these people doing in sort of justifying their decisions. If I say something is green, I'm not saying it's green because it's because, you know, the category sort of would have indicated that this would be a good color to have, you know, this would be a good call out to have. This messaging is right because I have spoken to my consumer. I know what the consumer wants, and hence I am asking the client to sort of speak a certain way and look a certain
If a CPG firm is planning on being present in multiple categories, is it advisable to have separate brands for each category, or one overarching brand better, or overarching brand with sub-brands for each category?
What's a CPG firm?
Consumer packaged goods, consumer goods, FMCG.
FMCG. Okay. So they are being in, I'm just reading the question, multiple categories. It is advisable to have separate brands. What kind of multiple categories is exactly?
FMCG and personal care. So let's just look at personal care. Let's take personal care as an example. So let's say there is face scrubs, face creams, shampoos, face washes, stuff like that.
Right.
Does it necessarily?
You know, I think that a lot of trust from a particular hero product is sometimes translated to others. So if you look at Wow, this brand is actually really successful on Amazon. I'm not a big fan of the product. I have tried it. I don't personally love it, but I love what the brand has achieved across categories, right? Like in this personal care space. And vinegar shampoo did really well. Like it sold like tons of copies and stuff like that. And now they have everything from, you know, onion hair oil and this, that, and the other. So I think it depends. But if you're in this space for personal care, I guess you might be able to sort of, you know, the same promise of quality and purity across B2B, across B2C, within categories, that is something that you can do. But it actually, the first thing you have to do is establish your brand architecture. Whether you're following the brand house, whether you're following the house of brands. I mean, there are a couple of brand architecture modules, you know, and which one is it that your brand is following is the first decision. And then the second decision will be, this will lead to whether you need to have a separate brand or whether you need to have one brand across.
Okay. So I think this is an important point, because the fact that there are different ways of thinking about multiple categories, whether one brand, a brand of house or house of brands, as you mentioned, is not very well known. So that you highlighted is, I think, relevant for everybody to ask the people they're working with to explore both these routes of creating brands in different categories.
Yeah. I want to answer Anvita's question. No, the name is not Kada. It's called Grandma's Kada. And it is generic for a reason, because if I call it something else, people will not know what they are buying. So go to my website. There's a whole explanation on why the name is what it is. The project is up there. So Anvita Sarkari, please check that out.
Okay, you skipped a question, so I'm going to go back now. This is on what is the brand strategy for well-being. Arpita Donkar asks this. I'm impressed with its packaging and look. Assuming you have worked on it, I would like to know a little bit more.
Sorry?
Well-being.
Well-being, yes. I have worked on Grandma's Kada. So well-being, actually, their first product is a direct it's exactly like 8 Greens, which is a brand that's in America. And then they came to India with something called Daily Greens. And I think they've emulated that pretty much. So there was no brand strategy when Wellbeing came to us. So what we are doing for them is the Kada project. And that's the one that, you know, we sort of build the brand strategy for, because it was very different from their first offering, which was, you know, aimed towards the more urban market. And, you know, it was your daily fruits and veggies in one tablet and stuff like that. This now was more for, you know, the healing and the Ayurveda based, immunity approach, and for a sore throat and headache and things like that. So the two very different products to begin with. In fact, this is a discussion that we've been having with Wellbeing, that, you know, the overarching brand strategy needs to be put in place. But no, when they started, it was just a direct emulation of what 8 Greens is, which is not their product, it's another product.
What is the role of user experience functionality in packaging? Can you provide some examples within the FMCG space where packaging adds to the user experience or the product functionality?
So for example, if you look at the Cocoa Puff project that I shared, right? So now the user actually of that is a child. So whereas the front of pack and all of this is things that the parents will look at and pick up, but when it comes home, it comes home, and eventually the user is the child. So you sort of understand what is the journey of your product as the decision making and the final usage, and that's sort of what we did with that. Sort of we made sure that there was a game behind it. Even with Kada, the Grandma's Kada, this thing, we used a QR code because it leads to a brand film, and then that can keep changing. Sometimes the brand wants to give a discount, so the QR code will then not lead to the brand film, and it will lead to like a discount offer and stuff like that. Different surfaces can do different things. You can actually do surprise elements. So say for example, say if you open one of these boxes, and then there is a nice message over there, which is just smile, or it's just something simple, which is not a sales related thing. Paperboard, for example, does a fabulous job. If you see the bottom of the paperboard packaging, it's beautiful. There is a new message every time, and then now that you know it, every time you buy a paperboard product, you're going to sort of turn it around and look at it. Yeah, Rahul, please connect with me. I'll be looking forward to your email.
Anant Juyal asks, does the use of mnemonics in packaging helps or confuses the customer while understanding the product?
The use of generic mnemonics confuses people. I think everybody, using similar things confuses them, but at the same time, some form of standardization is important. So if you have a heart icon, and if you're trying to say it's heart healthy, it's easy, right, for people to understand. And also you have to bear in mind that not everybody is going to be reading fine text, right? So if you have an icon which is sort of thoughtfully made, which conveys what you're going to do, then you look further and you'll read a little below it. So I don't think it's confusing. It's confusing when it's too small, too generic, and it's all clubbed together. Then it gets confusing, in my opinion.
One last question that we have here. I run an FMCG food brand. What would be the feature of my product I should showcase to maximize conversions?
What kind of food brand do you
Yeah, what kind of food brand? I think we could ask that question out loud. And Shoaib Kohli, would you be able to tell us what kind of food brand? Sweet corn.
Okay. So can you please tell me a little about, is this sweet corn or is this baked sweet corn, or is it cooked, or what is it?
I'm just going to give him
ready to eat sweet corn. I think what we need to do is we need to look at the 3C model again. You have to first look at the context, then you have to look at the consumer, and then we'll sort of be able to tell you what your content is.
Kruti, that brings us, I think, to the end of the questions that we've got in this session. Want to thank you once again for your time, for the valuable insights you've shared. To the audience, thanks for participating. We'll be back next Friday. We'll share you the details. Kruti,
I'm
great.
sorry for all the technical glitches. I don't do this. This is my first ever webinar, so I'm a little okay with all of this. But thank you for bearing with me.
Not at all. It was a privilege having you with us. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.